Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of this top 10, top 10 Wrestlemania Celebrities. Now for this list we're going to consider their contribution to the show, how big of an impact it made, and how memorable the appearance or appearances were. We're living in what I would consider a golden age of celebrity appearances. Mostly over the last few years they've been really good. I remember a time where it was less than 50-50. You had more bad appearances than good ones. We're going to celebrate the appearances that helped WrestleMania become one of the biggest events worldwide every year, right up there with the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and anything else you could think of. With that being said, jumping right in, number 10, Morton Downey Jr. from Wrestlemania 5. And when you look over this list, this is probably the least famous person that makes this list. For those of you that may be too young or just flat out don't remember Morton Downey Jr., he was kind of the precursor to what Jerry Springer would be. And yes, I know there's a certain amount of you that are too young to remember Jerry Springer even. Morton Downey Jr. was a TV talk show that depended on conflict, depended on fights on there, arguments. He was a chain smoker, and that was part of his gimmick. For WrestleMania 5, he had a Piper's Pit segment with Roddy Piper. And if you ask me, this is one of Piper's most memorable WrestleMania moments, was this segment. This was absolutely fun. It fits so well with both characters, and it made the show WrestleMania 5 feel even that more important. Even though it was built up with the main event being one of the biggest main events in WrestleMania history, the Mega Powers exploding, this little piece made the show that much more special. Now going from that, our number 9, Bob Uecker from both WrestleMania 3 and 4. On both WrestleManias, Bob Uecker served as a guest commentator, backstage interviewer, ring announcer, and all-around fun inclusion for the show. He added that levity. He got wrestling. He understood what he was doing. Whether it be a back-and-forth interaction with Jesse Ventura or interviewing the likes of the Islanders or Andre the Giant, Bob Uecker just got it. He understood wrestling and he understood entertainment, and he brought something to the table on arguably the biggest WrestleMania of all time and the follow-up the next year. There's a reason that Bob Uecker's in the Hall of Fame, and this is exactly why. Now going from that, our number 8, the celebrity with possibly the most WrestleMania appearances, Maria Menounos. Not only did Maria Menounos wrestle on WrestleMania 28, her and Kelly versus Beth Phoenix and Eve Torres, she was involved in WrestleMania 31, 32, and 33 as a hostess, kind of like the same thing that Bob Uecker did. And Maria, much like Bob Uecker, added that little extra bit to the show, made it fun, brought different people into it. She was someone, I believe it was Entertainment Tonight was a show she was on. I never watched the show. I know her and I've seen clips, but I think it was Entertainment Tonight. So she was able to incorporate WrestleMania and the build to WrestleMania with Entertainment Tonight, which has a huge audience, which I'm sure brought some of them over to the show. It may not have made a big dent, as some of these other people you'll see will. But for her enthusiasm, her commitment, her continued excellence on the shows, I had to include her on the list. I think she was absolutely awesome. And I'd love to see Maria come back, even if it's just for a celebrity induction into the Hall of Fame. I think Maria is awesome. Now going from that, our number 7. We already talked about one former baseball player that's in the WWE Hall of Fame. Here's another. The all-time hits leader, Pete Rose. There was a 3-year stretch with WrestleMania 14, 15, and 2000 where Pete Rose would show up, play a heel a little bit, and then get demolished by Kane. And it was an ongoing skit for 3 years in a row. WrestleMania 14, in my opinion, one of the most important WrestleManias of all time. It really kicked off the Steve Austin era, really jump-started WWE to taking over WCW. Pete knew who he was, knew how to play his part, and gave it everything here. I know that Pete Rose in the WWE Hall of Fame is kind of a nod to the fact that he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, which he absolutely should be. I understand he bet on baseball, and that's a no-no, but You can't have a Hall of Fame without the guy that leads the league in league history and runs. One of the great baseball players of all time. I mean, if you really think about his legacy, it's right up there with guys like Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and more recent players like Cal Ripken or even Alex Rodriguez. Just one of the great players of all time. Unfortunately made some bad mistakes. To our benefit, I think it added to his WrestleMania lore, which is why he makes the list. Now going from that, our number 6. The only band that I can remember to play twice at WrestleMania, Motorhead. Motorhead not only gave Triple H several theme songs, they also played for him live at 2 different WrestleManias, WrestleMania 17 and WrestleMania 21. Now when you think about the history of Triple H and his character and how integral the Motorhead songs were to his character and how great of a band Motorhead is. They're one of the most underrated heavy metal bands of all time. A lot of people talk about Metallica, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, all being the greatest metal bands of all time. They seem to skip over Motorhead, who had just as an amazing career with tons of amazing songs, and some of the best WWE theme songs of all time came from Motorhead. An instantly recognizable band with instantly recognizable theme songs that fit the characters so perfectly. That, in my opinion, is why they made this list. Now, coming up next, our number 5. This is one that probably is going to go up this list if we do it again in 5 years or so, because I think he's going to continue to have moments, and that's Logan Paul. At the time of this recording, we've already seen him wrestle at WrestleMania 38, with him and The Miz going up against Dominic and Rey Mysterio. He's scheduled in just about 2 weeks to wrestle against Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 39. And if he keeps on the trajectory, I think he'll continue to do these big shows, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, so on and so forth. This is a guy that absolutely gets it. He understands wrestling. He understands his popularity. He understands who he is and the character he should portray. A lot of people don't like Logan Paul. And I can't say I'm personally a fan of his work outside of WWE, but what he's done in WWE has made me a fan of him. And yes, I know, as I'm recording this, he's embroiled in some controversy with some crypto and other bad decisions. I understand that. For the sake of this, we're specifically talking about what he did at WrestleMania and how he may have brought and continued to bring eyes to the show. You can't deny that Logan Paul, in the social media era, the YouTube era, the Twitch era, Instagram, TikTok, Logan Paul is one of the biggest stars in the world right now. His name is known right up with people like Mr. Beast and Sniper Wolf and the DeMillo sisters and even the Kardashians. All these celebrities that a big portion of their celebrity has come from social media. Logan Paul's right up there with the most famous of them all, and I guarantee he brought some of those fans over onto his wrestling career, which is ultimately why you bring the celebrities in. You want them to bring their fans with them. When he got in the ring, he was absolutely better than anyone expected, anyone could have dreamed of. For that reason, Logan Paul makes our list. Now go from that, our number 4. One of the few celebrities to main event a WrestleMania, Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor famously main event at WrestleMania 11 against Bam Bam Bigelow. In what a lot of people consider a down period for the WWE, Lawrence Taylor was that guy that brought them the attention that they may not have had since the Hulk Hogan era, where a lot of the Hulkamaniacs were starting to grow up, starting to become teenagers, lose interest in pro wrestling. And all of a sudden you have what is one of the greatest linebackers of all time shows up and builds to a WrestleMania match at the highlight of his career. You got to remember, at this time, Lawrence Taylor was one of the 3 or 4 best football players in the world. He was a multiple-time champion. He was a multiple-time Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer, a guy that set records and put fear in other teams' fandom. I could tell you, being a Philadelphia Eagles fan, that Lawrence Taylor and the New York Giants were someone that I didn't want to see every year. He always had great showings. He always would go out of his way and become the most important player on the field. That extra credibility That extra build helped WrestleMania during one of the lean years, which is why Lawrence Taylor makes this list, which is why I think he's right up there at number 4. Now going from that, our number 3, the other celebrity to main event of WrestleMania, Mr. T. Mr. T was in the main event of the first WrestleMania, him and Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper and Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff. It could be argued that WrestleMania doesn't become the massive success that it does without the involvement of Mr. T, and I would have to agree with that. Again, much like I said with Morton Downey Jr., people that are too young to remember this don't understand how massive Mr. T was. Mr. T was the biggest television star in the world, and I know for a streaming age, that doesn't sound that impressive, but think about it like this. Think of someone like a Pedro Pascal, who's on 2 massive shows in streaming right now, The Mandalorian and Last of Us, and also has been involved with Game of Thrones. Imagine that. Now multiply that by 10, and that's the celebrity that you have with Mr. T. Mr. T was everywhere. He had cereal, he had toys, he had commercials, TV shows. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing Mr. T. People had him on his shirts. People had them on their lunch boxes at school. Everywhere there was something about Mr. T. He was in the Rocky movie, Rocky 3. One of the massive stars of this time. And for them to get him for WrestleMania was a massive coup, was a massive thing. This definitely helped set WrestleMania and put it on the map. The reason I didn't put it up a little higher is the quality of the 2 matches really isn't that great. But for his contribution, he definitely deserves to be on this list. And somewhere, he's still doing his Hall of Fame speech about his mom. Going from that, our number 2, Floyd Money Mayweather. Floyd had a boxer versus wrestler match at WrestleMania 24 against The Big Show. And much like I said with Lawrence Taylor and Mr. T and some of these other people, Mayweather brought a credibility. He brought what at the time was one of the biggest celebrities as a boxer, and arguably the best boxer of the last 20 years, and most popular and most famous boxer since the days of Mike Tyson. Mayweather made that WrestleMania must-see viewing for fans that were not fans of WWE. People that were just Mayweather fans, people that were casuals that may have not watched WWE in 4 or 5 years. You gotta remember, this WrestleMania isn't that far away from the Chris Benoit situation, where WWE could have easily lost most of their fan base, and they did lose quite a bit of it. A lot of them came back because of this build, because you would see it on SportsCenter. You would see it on the news every night. This was just an amazing piece of work, an amazing way to keep WrestleMania relevant and make WrestleMania great again. Just a fun celebrity match. One of the best celebrity matches, in my opinion, at WrestleMania. And kudos to The Big Show for helping put that through and being willing to look vulnerable against a guy that was a third of your size. Now, before we get into our number 1, we do a thing here called the best of the rest. Basically stuff that was considered for this list but didn't quite make it. First up, from WrestleMania 38, and yes, this is our second appearance from that show, Johnny Knoxville. Like I said it in my review of WrestleMania last year, one of my favorite matches on both nights was Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn. I understand it was absurd. I understand that wrestling purists hate the match and think it's garbage. Jim Cornette would probably hang me if he heard this opinion, but I think it was just fun. This reminded me of why I am a wrestling fan. Sometimes it's the absurdity. Sometimes it's just, you gotta let yourself go and accept that stuff that should never happen is going to happen. Like an undead zombie mortician that has a 20-year undefeated streak at WrestleMania. Or a 5'9" bearded guy that should have never made it being the main event of WrestleMania. The absurdity of this, with the fact that this was in what to me is Sami Zayn's real breakout year, just a fantastic match. I'd love to see Knoxville come back and do something else like this again. Hopefully they do it at some point, because he's getting pretty old. I know he's a bit older than I am. I think he's in his 50s. I'm not exactly sure. But he can't be doing the Jackass humor much longer. And I would just love to see him again. I'm a huge Jackass fan. I think most of the people of my generation are. Even if I wasn't, this was an amazing match and just really fun in my opinion. Now, last but not least on our best of the rest, from WrestleMania 37, Bad Bunny. And like I said, you may notice a lot of these have things in common. Logan Paul, Bad Bunny, Johnny Knoxville, they've all been rather recent. Even Maria Menounos isn't that far back in time. We're in an era where the celebrity involvement is not just a token thing. They're not just showing up there to promote themselves. They're showing up there because they love wrestling and they want to be part of the show. Bad Bunny had an absolutely awesome match. Him and Damian Priest going up against The Miz and John Morrison. It's kind of funny how Miz is usually picked to be that celebrity guy, being that he's a quasi-celebrity with what he did in the real world and Road Rules and all of that years ago, and his Miz and Mrs. show, and obviously doing movies and such. Bad Bunny overproduced here. No one expected Bad Bunny to have a great match, and he did. He crosses over so many boundaries, and so many people know him and know his music. He's easily one of the 2 or 3 biggest stars in music in the world right now, and he had an absolutely amazing match at WrestleMania. So much so that even now, he's part of the WWE video game. I'd love to see Bad Bunny make a return. I think it would be absolutely awesome. Now, before we get into our number 1, if you think I put someone too high, put someone down too low, left someone off the list altogether, let me know what you think. Hit me up here in the comments. And our number 1 celebrity at WrestleMania, from WrestleMania 14, Iron Mike Tyson. Much like Mr. T helped define WrestleMania as being one of the big events in all of the world, Mike Tyson helped define the Attitude Era and the Steve Austin run as being the most important thing in wrestling at the time, and probably one of the great boom periods in the history of wrestling. It is one of the great boom periods in the history of wrestling. One of the most fondly looked about times in wrestling history. It can be argued back and forth that we're never going to see another time like we had at the Attitude Era, where between WWE and WCW, over 10 million people every Monday night were tuning into a wrestling show. They get 1/5 of that now, and they're very happy with the 2 million they get. They used to get 5 and 6 million, and sometimes up into the 8 millions. And I know streaming has changed that, and the numbers are different now. You can't just look at ratings. But for Mike Tyson to come out at the height of his popularity and put his stamp on WrestleMania, put his stamp on Steve Austin, that did so much for the WWE. To me, this was one of the things that really turned the tide, that really got people that were just watching WCW because of the NWO to tune in and go, hey, what's going on over here with Mike Tyson? What's this with Steve Austin and Vince McMahon? And once they tuned in, they got hooked to that, and a lot of them never went back to WCW. This, to me, it may not be one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history, but it's one of the great moments in WrestleMania history. The passing of the torch to Steve Austin, who's going to take and make himself arguably the biggest star in the history of wrestling. This was his coronation. This was his party to show everybody that he was the guy. Without Mike Tyson, does it feel as important? Probably not. He's so important that even on the DVD cases and the VHS cases, there were 3 faces. It was Michaels, Austin, Tyson. You can't argue the impact that Iron Mike Tyson had on this era and had on pro wrestling as a whole. Just a phenomenal showing, in my opinion, why he's the number 1 celebrity in the history of WrestleMania. With all that being said, if you made it to the end here, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. And again, if you think I put someone too high, someone too low, left them off altogether, let me know. If you made it all the way to the end, let me know who your favorite celebrity at WrestleMania is. It doesn't have to be what you think is the most important, just your favorite. It could be one of these people. Maybe it was Ozzy Osbourne coming out with the British Bulldogs. Maybe it was Ice-T rapping The Godfather to the ring. Maybe it was any litany of other appearances that happened at WrestleMania. Let me know down here in the comment. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.